seated. We will get the proceedings going. I thank you very much for coming. I've attended many sessions at Davos. This one I am genuinely the most excited about. I think this is a topic which is A, hugely critical, and B, I want to go away learning myself new things. So I'm very, very excited. I do want to, while the panel needs no introduction, I'll probably do very quickly. So I'll begin with Minister Irani. She's a Minister for Women and Child Development and also Minister of Minority Affairs. I have had the pleasure of listening to her last year at Davos, and her ability to put complex topics in a very elegant fashion is spectacular. I do not think I saw anybody else do it that well, and I saw many leaders last year. So I don't want to embarrass you, but I genuinely, this is a heartfelt compliment.
Thanks.
Next to her, on her right, is Chris Elias. Chris, is that okay? Dr. Christopher Elias, precisely, but Chris is good. He's the president of Global Development Forum, BMGF, which does a lot of relevant work in this space across the world, actually. So we'll get some global perspectives coming from that as well. On his right is dear friend Debjani. Debjani is the president for NASSCOM. NASSCOM is the vanguard of the tech industry, and tech industry has genuinely been a pioneer in the private sector, certainly, in India, and leading from the front in this space. So we hope to learn from best practices and also some room for improvement. And on my right is Mirai Ben. Mirai Ben is the chairperson for SEVA. And I remember my days at business school in IIM Ahmedabad and being genuinely blown away by what SEVA does across the world. So I have fond memories from 27, 28 years ago of, and I'm hoping to once again learn a lot. So this is the panel. As I said, I'm very excited. We'll touch 3 topics in the panel, and I'll just make a few quick remarks, but I'll quickly turn over to the audience. So the 3 topics we want to touch upon is, how do we have a more inclusive approach? A more inclusive approach to understanding women's engagement, both areas where they're not participating, but areas where they are participating, but it's undervalued. So on both aspects, so we'll cover that. And we will also then want to learn from some places where best practices which are already there, how we can learn from that. And then more importantly, talk about what more can be done. What are the enablers which will allow us to make progress going forward? So with that being said, I'm going to start with the first question, Minister Irani, to you, and also to Chris after that, which is essentially about, in your experience, what could be a paradigm of a more inclusive approach to women's engagement? Yeah.
Thank you. I think that the answer we need to recognize, how do you define women who can't participate? How many of them choose not to participate? And those who choose not to participate, should they be shamed for not wanting to leverage that choice? So let me contextualize it a little bit. 230 million women received their bank accounts for the first time, courtesy the Jan Dhan Yojana. Of the 400 million loans given out under Mudra, 70% of the beneficiaries were women and women-owned businesses, which means, and my maths is not good as yours, 280 million women-owned businesses got money. The NPA is less than 2.5%. So 230 million first get introduced to financial instruments and institutions, but 280 million show up for business. So why did they choose not to participate? Was it the lack of access? Was it the lack of acceptability? Or was it a lack of opportunity? If we can detail our understanding on that, we can build better for the future of women. The second aspect is, when we look at inclusion, what is the inclusion we seek? Are we seeking inclusion only from the perspective of policymakers? Are we seeking inclusion from the perspective of private sector? Are we seeking inclusion from communities? Now, how would I elaborate on this? Let's start from communities instead of the other way around. What does a woman get when she has money? Respect within a family unit? But if that money performs differently in her hand, what does that benefit? We know, and research now proves, that if a woman within a family unit owns a capital asset, she is less likely to be a victim of domestic violence, which gives a whole new skew to the fact that Prime Minister Modi, when he built houses for the poor, 40 million built, his only condition was that either it is to be singularly be owned by women or jointly owned by the woman of the house. 70% of the 40 million homes that were built are singularly owned by the woman. There is no research now as to how her security within the family unit and community is enhanced. The question is, why didn't it happen before? Were we lacking in resources? No. Were we lacking in opportunity to deliver? No. We were lacking in an administrative resolve to do so. Which brings me to the policymaker. And when you talk about inclusion, will the inputs and capital inputs as such on issues in only and only women owned enterprises then be decidedly called inclusion? If you enhance the sphere of how inclusion is looked upon, then can the investment in building homes for the poor count in the gender inclusion bracket? The fact that 130 million households now have water, but that water is managed by committees of women across the country, it has never happened before at such scale. What is the financial potential and the monetization capacity of the caliber of those women at the grassroots? And when they earn something, how do they pass it forward? And Chris and I were speaking just before this panel. We lack a research of the impact of such initiatives because it can inform global policy makers. And now let's look at the private sector and the word inclusion. I was as a member of parliament, receiving end of help from BCG and the Gates Foundation, which went into my area, which has a 2.5 million population, did not have a medical college, did not have a nursing college, did not have even a CT scan machine or a dialysis center. You came to Amethi, told us where the red flags are, and the government stepped up. So what is the private sector's definition of inclusion? Is it only so that money flows to a capital asset? Or are you helping us by informing us better, not only at the central level, but at the individual political level, informing us better through your support so that genuinely the issue of inclusion then can be addressed? And lastly, when people look at the term inclusion and women, from a commercial perspective, Seema was one of the conversations we just had with bankers closed door. Women in businesses are not looking at handouts. They are looking at themselves being commercially viable entities that need fiscal support. So can we move the narrative of inclusion in the private sector from a handout or a hand-me-down or an endowment to genuine economic engagement on merit? And if needed, you can move the needle, especially in the private sector investment circuit, from a female enterprise perspective to that. That is the greatest help you give the gender agenda, because I have no problems in accepting this on an international forum. Far too long has poverty and inability and being disenfranchised being sold as a merit to attract investment. I would rather women now attract investment. Policymakers now resolve to invest in gender and inclusion because it makes sense to have women at the table.
That's thank you, Minister Rani. That's a very lot of food for thought and a lot of facts as well. So I think we'll endeavor to build on this to keep. Chris, I think you're coming after this. It's not an easy job, but as you
Definitely not.
So as you listen to Minister Irani, are there, first you can revert in, you can build on that in any fashion. But if there are learnings from your work of your foundation across the world as well, which is germane to this, feel free to share that as well. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Niraj. And first, let me say thank you to you and the minister for inviting me to be on this panel, and to the Confederation of Indian Industry. It's an honor to be with all of the panelists, particularly Marai, who I visited Seva on my very first trip to India in 1991. So it's just great to see it go from strength to strength. And also just congratulate the minister and the government of India on really, in the recent leadership of the G20, championing women-led development. and really putting it at the center of that discussion. In so many of those many events that you held for the G20 over the course of 2023, it was clear that gender kind of shined through, that gender lens that we take to all kinds of problems that we face in meeting the SDGs. And I look forward, we were talking before the panel, the minister and I, about how she's going to work to help pass that ball to the Brazilian delegation as they lead the G20 this year. So, Niraj, back to your question to me, and I was thinking about this, and you provided a really good brief for, quote, the numbers game, and you have provided quite a few numbers. And I won't reiterate the numbers, but I thought I'd say three things that I think draw from our experience, both in India as well as globally. The first is about the numbers. The numbers, as we're beginning to understand them, show that much of women's contribution to the global economy, the national economy, their local economies, is entirely invisible. We don't measure it. Women make up the largest proportion of people working in the informal sector, and we tend not to measure that. There are some data, that I think the economic survey in India recognized some of the limitations of just measuring workforce participation through a formal economy lens. And so we need to gather better data. In the Gates Foundation, in general, we support in all of our projects, actually in all of our grants, we have what we call a gender integration marker. So when grants come to me for approval, if they haven't filled in that form that says, how have you been intentional about gender in the design of this grant, you have to go back and redesign it. It's a check on, are we really integrating the gender lens across all of our philanthropy? And I think we've seen improvements. So, and there's some things that are easy to correct. And what are misclassifications of data? Smallholder farmers, if they're men, we call them farmers. Smallholder farmers, if they're women, we consider that farming an extension of their household work. And they don't even get counted as farmers when they're actually doing most of the smallholder farming. So there are some simple things about how we classify data. And then we obviously need to collect better data. And we should do that in the context of national surveys, and we need a multidimensional approach. We talked about the gender index of the WEF being updated to get a more inclusive perspective. So the first point I'd make is that we do need better numbers, crisper numbers, more inclusive numbers. The second thing I'd say, though, is that we have enough data to act. We shouldn't wait for perfect data. We shouldn't admire the problem. We should move forward. And those are my two other points. One is, first, how do we make it easier for women to actually join the formal economy? If we look at the barriers to accessing, the workplace as we have traditionally defined it, there are so many, right? There's the, for rural women, there's often issues around land rights. There's access to capital, access to equipment. Access to skills training, education, et cetera. There are many barriers that keep women out of the formal economy, and we can start knocking those barriers down. And the government of India has a number of important initiatives in this direction. Your Yojana, tell me if I'm pronouncing it wrong, and the Mudra initiative, helping female entrepreneurs get access to capital and really begin to enter the formal economy. The third point I'd make is that we need to think about how do we, if you will, formalize the informal economy. Take away the barriers that keep people who are in the informal economy out of the economy. And that'll benefit both men and women, but it'll disproportionately benefit women because they are the largest proportion of the informal economy. And there are things there that relate to the care economy. So if you look at I think it's 3 or 4 times, if you count, women's work or you count work for caring for young children, for sick people, for older people, that falls probably 80-20 on women versus men. And so if we can begin to think about how we can support, whether it's paid leave or access to child care, I know you have an important initiative with the Palna program on using the Anganwadi workers as to help build better creches that relieve some of that barrier that's currently presented by a highly biased care economy that disadvantages women. So I think there's three things. We need better numbers, but we shouldn't wait for better numbers. We can act now on getting more women into the formal economy, and we can start thinking about how we help everybody in the informal economy benefit. So we saw in COVID, that if people in the informal economy, again, majority of whom are women, fell out of economic productivity faster. And so how do we bring them back? And this is where I think the final point I'd make is, we can leverage the incredible success of India in the digital public infrastructure to help get people back if they fall out of the economy, with skilling and upskilling people, using the digital infrastructure, if you will, to get people the training they need, the access they need to re-enter if they have fallen out because of illness or other circumstances. So long answer to your question, Niraj, but back over to you.
No, I think this is you articulated it very well, and the 3 points make a ton of sense. We need better numbers, but we don't need to wait for that. So in that vein, I'm going to come to Miraiben first to you, right? I mean, Seva has been a pioneer. Right? I mean, that's the only word I can think of in organizing women in the informal sector. And from your extensive experience and innovative model that Seva has put in play, share some ideas about what you've done to make women more visible in economic terms. And I think there's something to learn from that for the informal economy in general.
Thank you very much, and a special thank you to the Honorable Minister and CII and the Gates Foundation, with whom we have a very, very fruitful partnership. You have strengthened so many of our women's collectives, and sometime we'd like to share more stories about that. Just a few words about the informal economy, because I'm not sure whether our audience is aware that in India, more than 94% of the female workforce is informal. So we're talking about upwards of 250 million women are informal workers. Of course, as Chris has already said, we don't really know, and that is one of the challenges. And I think when our late founder, Ila Bhatt, began Seva, 51 years ago now, she felt that this was a grave injustice. All women work, inside the home, outside the home. When we organize women into unions and cooperatives and collectives and self-help groups, what we see is that women are working all the time. They hardly sleep. So, and we are not able to capture this. And she always said, this is perhaps the gravest injustice of all. So much solid economic contribution, but we don't have the numbers, and because we don't have the numbers, we don't always have the laws and policies, etc. Of course, we've come a long, long way since 50 years ago. I don't want to say we're stuck, but there's still a lot to do. I wanted to pick up a few points on measurement, which I thought was very important, but just one of the things that I think perhaps was different about Seva and Ilaben's work, our work, is that we began to organize women. What does that mean? That means you go door to door, house to house, go to the fields, forests, seashores, wherever women are working, bring them together, forge their unity and solidarity. And let me tell you, it's not a mean task, as we are such a complex country with so many castes and communities, languages and what have you, as you all know. So the important bedrock, the building block, is organizing, building women's unity, sisterhood, and solidarity. And then a lot of things very organically come out. For example, women say, we need access to financial services. So we created Seva Bank, because by the way, 50 years ago, the nationalized bank said, sorry, you're not bankable. When we went to the insurance companies 50 years ago, you are bad risk. We said, but that's why we're coming to you. Because you die too much in childbirth. Again, thankfully, that has now changed. But these are some of the challenges. So the bedrock is organizing and then building membership-based organizations of the women, where from worker they become manager. So they are the owners, they are the managers, and they are the users of their own organizations. I think that has been something that has been quite perhaps a small contribution to our nation building. I think on the measurement, what's very important is visibilizing women's work, as you had so ably said, Chris. But we find many barriers. And there's a big difference between when we organize women and bring them together and the official statistics. Let me give you an example. In Seva Delhi, where we work, we have 72,000, a few years ago, 72,000 home-based workers. The official statistics said there's 60,000 workers in the whole of New Delhi, and we only work in a small part of New Delhi. So there's this huge gap, and it's partly because of the way questions are asked, the way the questionnaires are, the probing. They go and ask the quote-unquote head of household, who's usually a man, who says, oh, she doesn't do anything. She's at home. She's a housewife. You ask the women, and because they've internalized this, they say faltu kaam, for those of us who know Hindi, useless work, or we don't do any work. And it's partly because there's a blurring between the lines of their domestic work, their unpaid care work, and their economic activity. There are many other issues also. Also, subsistence activities, as you mentioned, Chris, are often missed. Women are the farmers of our country, and yet all the programs, even today, some of the programs, men come forward and take all the monies and whatever benefits government is rightly offering us. So I think one of the things we found is the need for micro-studies. There is the official data, the NSS, and so on, but we think that women's workforce participation is much more in India than we see. Because we are just simply not counted. So we have to figure out better ways. Training of enumerators, perhaps, involving organizations like ours who can do micro-studies and show the discrepancy in the data. Because if we don't measure, we won't have policies. So I think one of the contributions, just to conclude, is both organizing women at the grassroots, bringing out their issues, like financial services, childcare, insurance, and so on, and also taking these to the policymakers. And if you have some solid work on the ground and evidence, then we found that policymakers, whichever government, over the last 50 years we've seen, are open and responsive, and we can work together to change it.
Thank you, Miravan. I think that was very helpful to give a bit of a sense of the ethos of Seva. Debjani, I'm going to come to you. And after that, I know Minister has to leave a bit earlier, so I'll come for the next question to Minister, and then she has to leave, but we'll carry forward the discussion. So Debjani, NASSCOM, as I said, is works with the entire IT industry, which is the largest private sector employer, to my mind, of women in India, right? So in some sense, they are at the vanguard of pushing the art of the possible. Do you think this tech sector or the IT sector is doing a fair job in measuring the contribution of women? Like, does that define the North Star, which we say for us, or do you think there's room for improvement?
I think what's best about the tech sector is that we have realized that women are absolutely critical for our success, period. It's not about women needing the jobs or women wanting to come in. We need the women in the sector for our success, our business continuity, and sustainability. I think that realization has completely sunk in every CEO I speak to. And that's, I think, the starting point. Now, in Davos, I think pretty much every discussion you've been part of has in some way or form talked about supply chain resilience. That is a key topic, right? That's one of the biggest threats and priorities right now. Now, how do you get supply chain resilience? One of the key drivers of that resilience is your talent supply chain, right? Today, very interestingly, when you're having discussions on talent supply chain, the world is looking at India, especially when you're talking about digital, and digital is needed by everyone. Every business today is a digital business, right? And within the industry, when we look at it, we are looking at women. The gap that's growing in digital talent expertise across the world, we strongly believe that gap can only be bridged by bringing in women, by skilling women, by bringing in women, right? Now, within our industry, surprisingly enough, it's not the technical skills that count. The top 10 skills are cognitive skills, analytical skills, creative skills, problem-solving skills. I will not apologize for saying this because I think it is a fact, but women have proven to be much better when it comes to problem solving, when it comes to multitasking, when it comes to being creative about problem solving. And we as an industry have realized that, right? So these are some of the key drivers of why the tech industry is truly embracing the charter to be a completely, and I would say genuinely inclusive industry, because we need the women in it. And 2 million women today. Interestingly, a large part of these women are coming from tier 2 and tier 3 cities in India. Training, getting the right talent there, building the skills in tier 2, tier 3, which, when one of the good things about COVID was that the government allowed us to, move to a work from home model, right? When we moved work from home, most of our employees moved to tier 2 and tier 3 cities. And as they did that, we realized that there's tremendous potential out there. We don't need to get them back to tier 1 cities because hybrid works. And as we did that, we realized that there's tremendous potential in the women in these cities. I'll sum it up here, but one example that's very close to my heart. One of the biggest skill gaps right now in India is cybersecurity, the tech industry, and it's a very vital skill. Impossible to go through the normal education route to bridge this gap. So the industry got together with NASSCOM and DSCI and said, let's figure out a creative way to bridge this gap because it's a must bridge gap, right? So we started a very short 1-year training program, women with just basic requirements in tier 2, tier 3, not tier 1 cities. In the first pilot that we did, which was like 6 months or 7 months, 2,000 women trained, all of them got jobs. Right? And now we're figuring out how to scale this for data analytics, data annotation, cybersecurity, and we want to do 90% of it in tier 2, tier 3 focused on women. So again, it goes back to, as Minister rightly said, we have to change the narrative. We are not doing women any favors. The women are helping us. Let's be very clear about this. If women did not come into this industry would not achieve the goals. If women-led development was not a priority for India, I don't think we will achieve our goal of becoming a developed nation. And I think the Prime Minister is very clear about that that's a must-do. So that's the mindset we have to change across industries in India.
I know, Minister, you have to run, so I'm going to ask you one question before you. So this point about NMLF, and I'll come to you if that's okay.
I would like to say something to the Minister before she goes, if I may.
Okay.
Just one sentence, Honorable Minister, and that is that I think the self-help group and the self-help group movement that you and the government have led are also a huge opportunity for formalizing the informal, plus visibilizing women's work. And we are also working closely with the Ministry of Cooperation for this. Only 2% of women's cooperatives in this country out of 800,000 cooperatives. We have to change that together.
I think I'll then, without you proposing a question,
Go for that.
wind up on this one pathway. So the Government of India yearly gives to self-help groups across the country a budget that possibly matches the defense. Wow. We did a study to look department by department how much money is going from every department. The biggest misconception is that self-help groups are only aided by the Rural Development Department. So first, that anomaly. Just in 5 years, and not the complete almost 10 years tenure of Prime Minister Modi, the outflow has been more than 5.5 lakh crores. It is evidenced through financial instruments. That being said, I think no conversation with Chris can end up without consequences. And we work in the ministry at a very accelerated speed with the foundation. And looking at our past history as to how well the partnership has done for both people as policymakers, people in private sector and the development sector, I'm happy to announce here as a consequence of the conversation that in collaboration with the foundation, and I will love if Debjani through NASSCOM can participate, and in collaboration with my ministry and that of Ministry of Statistics, we will hopefully create a framework as to how to count women who have thus far not been counted.
Excellent.
We can leverage your digital potential so that we go far and wide. And I am hopeful of that because the national education policy that I had the privilege of doing the foundation draft for the first time in the history of our country to build that policy, we went to 262,000 village education councils in the country. Councils that were on paper left untouched by governments before, but engaged with by the Prime Minister. And I think we know the potential when from bottom up the conversation starts. So for that, Debjani, we already have, through MyGov, a digital experience of reaching out to everybody in every village, self-help group or no self-help group. Even a woman who chooses not to participate, her voice shall be counted. So that's an ambition that I've just announced, with, of course, our standard supporter and most benevolent one, Chris, and the BMGF. In fact, this is the first ever lounge in Davos ever presented by a country. It is reflective of the collaboration right now which is underway. It is courtesy an idea that came as a proposal from the Ministry of Women and Child Development, went to the CII Center for Women's Leadership. The center itself set up because the ministry proposed it to the foundation. And all of it, I think, signals that when policymakers, when public participants in the development sector and industry comes together, history and miracles do tend to take place. So thank you, Chris. And looking at the speed at which people like Debjani deliver on the digital promise, you will hear countless voices from India as to how to create a framework to count women who have thus far not found a voice. Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you, Minister. And my question was about one bold idea, and you already talked about that without me asking the question. So thank you for that as well.
I'll get you. And thank you, Chris, for the support that you've shown. It means a lot. It will be of historical import by the time we're done with it.
We appreciate your leadership, and we're happy to support.
Thank you.
We know you have to leave, so we'll let you go. But Debjani, if you could come here, we can shift. We can keep the conversation going.
It's yours, Chris. I will. I will. Sure. Debjani, I'll catch up with you before we do the email. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Thank you, Minister.
We should discuss a bit more about the barriers.
Try to go. I think we'll catch as well. So if you have anything on your mind, I think it'll be great to hear on this. But I think what the minister just announced is definitely going to be a very bold step, and I think is much needed because I see charts after charts when I go to global forums of women labor participation, and I'm obviously disappointed when the India numbers look the way they do. And I think it's not because I'm disappointed, because obviously we have room to do better, but equally I think the numbers also have a room to be better. So I think the fault lies on both sides, and we need to do that. So I think that's genuinely encouraging. But maybe, Chris, if you want to come building on this again, are there some other unconventional ideas you have, building on Minister's point, which can help us, going beyond the traditional way of thinking that you may have seen in other parts of the world or your foundation may have ideas on?
Sure. Thanks, Niraj. And, maybe just to build on a couple of things that have been said, because there is a lot to build on in India. So one, just on this, I was thinking when I was listening to Bonnie's comments about the IT sector. I recently read some history of the development of artificial intelligence, et cetera. I was going back to try and understand the main theme on the promenade this week. And what was interesting, in the earliest days of computing, many of the programmers were women.
The first software program was written by women.
Exactly. But they were, again, it was a data misclassification. They weren't called programmers. They were called data entry, the typists, more or less. They were called typists, even though they were programming these machines from, in the most basic coding languages at the very beginning. And then somehow, over time, it became a very gender imbalanced profession, quote unquote. And now we're working to kind of catch up again. And we better do that very quickly, because the potential of AI depends on what you train it on, what you train these large language models, et cetera, on. And if we put in gender biased data, we will get gender biased results out of that artificial intelligence. So as part of our responsible use of AI, I think we need to actually begin to think, like we're doing in other development sectors, because AI has tremendous potential in the development sector, but we need to, again, look at it through a gender lens and make sure that we're responsibly developing these AI systems, these large language systems, et cetera, in a way that doesn't recapitulate the bias that we've seen and that was so well described by the minister and the other panelists in the run-up. The other thing I think that I didn't touch on much in my first set of comments is the power of the self-help groups that Mirai was talking about and the minister reiterated. You know, there are, as I understand, over 100 million women in throughout India who are participating in self-help groups. That's not adequately captured, even in the gender index that the WEF uses. So that's something that needs to be corrected. And the power of that and that model for replication in other countries as part of our efforts to reach the Sustainable Development Goals, I think is going to be quite important. And then I would just underscore what I said at the end of my first comment about how much this could be potentially leapfrogged and helped by the digital public infrastructure, which can reach people in their homes, can reach women directly through their phones, but won't do that unless we prioritize it. So again, just like AI, I think we really need to think about the potential for the leverage of digital public infrastructure to serve women, to bring them into the formal economy through skilling and other means, and to help formalize the informal economy for everybody, again, the majority of whom are women. Okay.
Can I just add one
Please.
thing to that? Because something Chris said, I'm currently obsessed about. You talked about the need to bring in women, especially to get AI right. Right? I'm paraphrasing you. I think this is such a critical statement, right? Because what we've been seeing today is whether the big companies and the big boys out there building AI, throwing it out there and saying now we have to make it safe. I think that has to fundamentally change, where we have to figure out how to make safe AI and not to how to build AI and then figure out how to make AI safe. That has to be a fundamental change that we have to see in the AI narrative and strategy. And I do believe that women are a must for that. If we have to build responsible technology, we have to build responsible AI. You have to have inclusive voices. You have to have inclusive ideas. And bringing in women, I honestly cannot see it happening if we do not have enough women doing the job. So I think that's such an important point.
Yeah, so I just want to build on what Debjani has said in Mirab, and then you come in. I couldn't agree more. I think the perspective that women bring to, and I think bringing them in the technology to make it better and safer is vital. So it's not really what I call, you don't do this with the mindset of an obligation. You do this with the mindset because they bring a distinctive element to this, which is what you have been saying earlier as well. For the IT industry, it was an opportunity to bring them in. So I really like that. So, Mirab, I'm sorry.
Yeah, not at all. Thanks. I just wanted to pick up on the digital and the AI point and agree with what has been said. But our experience is that women at the grassroots need a lot of facilitation. There's a huge gap. There's a digital literacy gap. The smartphones still are not in their hands. They're in the men folks' hands. And I would also, from my experience, suggest that, co-creation is important. There's no point designing digital systems and then after, these don't work for poor women. Well, we need to co-create them from the start. And how can AI enable and not, lead to loss of work or jobs? That would always be, because we have seen in the past, whenever technology and machines come in, the first to get kicked out of work are women. So we have to be very vigilant about things like this. And I just also quickly, Neeraj, before we open up for questions, wanted to mention some of the barriers. Digital, we've said, but we found with the support of the Gates Foundation, the importance of women's enterprise support systems for the businesses, collective businesses like cooperatives run by poor women, informal women workers, where they need capacity building so they know how to, for governance, how to run their collective, business development, or what we call developing the business mindset. If all your life you've been told your brain is in your foot, literally. And then suddenly you're expected to run your business. So business development services, marketing, particularly public procurement. There's the digital platform, government e-marketing. And, we've been working with them because frankly, the categories they had there didn't fit with women's work. So that's what I mean by co-creation and doing things together. So these are just some of the things I thought I'd mention because we didn't really get to barriers. If we want to go from informal to formal, we have to deal with these barriers. And perhaps one of the biggest at all, which we haven't mentioned at all, which is social protection. Women have childcare, elderly care, patient care, all kinds of care responsibilities. So that has to be supported and enabled. Otherwise, how will women be active in the workforce? They still are. It's a miracle. And there are many women in this room who will also it'll be resonating with them too. But I think we need to do much more as a country.
Okay, thank you for that, Miraben. I want to give the room an opportunity. I think I see a hand up. So can I get just pass a mic to you? Thank you.
Yeah, hi, thanks. My name is Seema Chaturvedi. Nice to meet all of you. I wear two hats. I have a foundation. Our foundation, it's in the name Achieving Women Enterprise, to the point Miraben meant, capacity building. Our funds, which is Achieving Women Equity, being a venture fund, investing in at the nexus of climate change and gender equity. I will tell you this, and we actively invest in tech-led innovation, investing in climate, health, agri, fintech, edtech. I want to ask this point. Yes, everything Miraben you said is true. Adding and building on your being kicked out, the narrative that's being kicked out right now are, oh, well, yes, you as a venture fund are doing great, being a gender equity focused fund, but we have bigger problems to deal with, i.e. climate change. So the allocation of philanthropic dollars that could have been the catalytic capital to bring in private sector capital to be invested in these opportunities are now being sidelined, and it's being seen as a binary choice. I go blue in my face saying to people, if you want scalability and stickiness of climate solutions, it is in the act of adoption. And adoption is best done when the caregivers or the people who are using those solutions, i.e. women, are brought on board, and hence the nexus is very strong. Question to the panel here, how can we make this commentary more strong such that people do not see it as a binary choice, and so they do not have this either or when it comes to allocation of capital?
A great question of getting crowded out by, it's very important issue of our time on climate change. Chris, could I get you to start on this?
Maybe I'll start. I couldn't agree more that it's not a binary either or choice. And I think what we need is a much more detailed or nuanced narrative that goes beyond the sound bites that are, frankly, all on the billboards along the street. We need to actually show that the consequences of climate change, which are here now and will be worse in the future, are already affecting the most vulnerable, who tend to be women in the informal sector in rural areas. If you look at smallholder farmers who depend on rain-fed agriculture, their vulnerability is to climate change, to flooding or lack of rain, often both in the same year. When the rains become unpredictable, they don't know what to plant. They have varieties that are 30 years old where they don't have access to more climate-resilient crop varieties. What you're trying to solve with your venture fund is actually the consequences of climate change today. Correct. It's not that climate is somehow some future thing that's coming that we have to avert. It's here today, and it's why your programs exist. It's what you're trying to fund is the direct consequences of climate change, from what you said, particularly in the agricultural sector and in rural areas. And also, in urban areas too, where we look at pollution and air quality issues, et cetera. So I just couldn't agree more that it's not a binary choice. We just need a more compelling narrative that goes beyond the sound bites. Over.
And if I could give a sound bite, I'll start saying climate change is a symptom of pervasive inequity that has persisted forever.
So may I just
Yeah.
quickly also respond, but very briefly because we want to have more questions. I think, Seemaji, one of the arguments we need to make is that investing in women's businesses, particularly small grassroots women's businesses, informal workers' businesses, makes really good sense because their businesses are green businesses. We need to bring this out. We need to document this. We need to show that they're low cost, low carbon, that their businesses walk lightly on this earth, and that really we have a lot to learn from their model of doing business, which is inclusive, democratic, and also responsible and respectful of Mother Nature.
Excellent. Yeah, please.
Hi, thank you all today. My name is Neeti. I'm sorry I was late and disruptive. I am a co-founder at an AI automation company called Automation Anywhere. We've been in business about 21 years, and we have a lot of R&D facilities in India that we work very closely with. We're also a partner in the reskilling revolution with the World Economic Forum. As a part of that cohort, we work with several social partners in India on the ground, and we've trained thousands of women. My ask is there is not much use if we can't provide the jobs. How can we get more jobs? It's demand and supply. It's as simple as that. If we can get more jobs for women available, and how do we enable these social partners on the ground to go get the jobs? We provide the training, we provide the computer labs, we provide the train-the-trainer programs, we provide the licenses, we do everything. But if the job doesn't exist, that program doesn't work. What can we do collaboratively to create these jobs? And to me, definitely need the government of India's help. We need NASSCOM, we need just a variety of different folks, including foundations. But how can we make this systemic? Right now, the job is if you happen to get a job or if there is something that works out, great. But the social partners are struggling to provide these jobs.
Maybe this one we give to Debjani, if you know, and I can try and address some of it, but Debjani.
Yeah, I'll speak for the tech industry, right? I would change the lens a little bit because it's not about skilling them and then finding the jobs. It's trying to understand which are the skills that are needed today by the industry, where are the jobs, where are the recs, and skilling back for that. So, for example, today within the industry, cybersecurity is number one. If you skill someone reasonably well and you get the right certification, etc., done, should be a credible certification because cybersecurity is so important for the business, that matters. But if you can get it done right, as I said, it's very easy. And we skilled women, literally 12th pass women from tier 2, tier 3 cities. But we worked with the government, we worked with Microsoft, and we really created an excellent curriculum. And this was steered by the Data Security Council of India, who was a cybersecurity expert, right? So this brought in a lot of credibility. And the women, after doing that course, it was immediate employment. Similarly, data analytics. At lower levels, data annotation, tremendous job opportunities here. Data collection, tremendous, especially Indian languages, right? So what we have found is skilling geared towards solving for existing problems. It absolutely, the employability connect is stronger. I think traditionally, given just how fast technology is changing and how fast the industry is changing, the legacy skills to employability chain is badly broken. So today, just skilling and hoping that will result in a job doesn't work.
And that's a very, very fair point. I absolutely agree with you. The challenge we face is we are jobs of the future. And so the jobs don't really exist. But the reason why I want more women trained on it is when those jobs come to be, we're not the last to get it. And that means we have to train them now so they're ready for when the job hits it. I mean, I'm at the cutting edge of technology. I understand that. Our platform is. But when I train on that platform, I want the women involved in those solutions and products, not as the last-ditch effort of, okay, there's some extra jobs that are needed for women here, and let's fill them with,
My one advice, and we are doing it because we are the government's training partner for digital skills in India, NASCOM. We are doing it. Move the focus from jobs to competencies. Build the competencies that are needed for future jobs, today's jobs, etc. It is much more, it's the currency of the job language in the industry because nobody knows what are the jobs of the future. Nobody knows how this is changing. Things are just changing so fast. Sorry, Neeraj.
Sorry, I'm just going to share one perspective from BCG, though I was a moderator. We are today 33,000 people globally, 46% of whom are women. So we want to get to equal parity. We're slightly away from that. One of the things we're trying to do is the topics of tomorrow, or topics which are the fastest growing topics, which is climate and sustainability, which is the topic of AI. We're trying to make sure we reach parity in that the fastest. So we are over-indexing in those skills of tomorrow, so that, that's...
To train the women for it.
Yeah, so that's true. I mean, so, but if, what I'm saying is, I'm just talking about our firm, but I'm sure many people are thinking like what we're thinking. So if you're training them, I'm sure if there's supply, the demand will be there. That's the only confidence I'm giving you. Maybe, I know you look a bit... Sorry, Miraben wants to say something. There's also a question I do want... Okay, so if you make a quick comment,
So
I
I'll
want to make
just
sure
be quick because we prefer the questions and then I have to also leave. I think, we have to go back. And it's good that the government has a new educational policy because our primary education is so weak, including in math and stuff. I'm talking about the mass of people in this country, not the 10 or 15 or 20% who have access. So that's one comment. But we find that the younger generation of SEVA members' daughters and granddaughters and great-granddaughters are more literate, that's the good news, and they're more tech-savvy, and they're looking for jobs like what you were describing. But I also want to say that most of our country people, particularly women, are self-employed. And that is the reality. And I think we have to start from there and we have to look at the major sectors which are major employers of women and see how we can try and help them get decent work and income with social protection, which I mentioned. And also some women who don't need anything from the state, like street vendors. All they want is not to be harassed by the police and the municipal authorities. And have access to financial services, working capital for their business. So, there's a lot of, what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of work and employment out there which needs to be strengthened, which we need to invest in. We don't need to create jobs. They're already doing work, which then can be upscaled and we can bring more technology, for example, in agriculture. Women can start driving tractors and using tools, et cetera, to make agriculture more remunerative. There are a whole lot of things to do. We can't answer this in one sentence, but I just thought we need to start where we are right now, and maybe that's a good place to start from our experience.
Sure. I did see one more hand. I'm conscious that you're going to leave. Yeah, please, absolutely. We are going to wrap in a couple of minutes. I think we are at the fag end. Thank you for coming. If you could, sorry, here's a mic. Okay, yeah, take that.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for an incredible presentation. I'm a religious scholar, and I'm used to deity worship. And looking at the street, it's clear that AI is the new deity on the block and is assembling quite a following. There is a sense that the boys have put together a runaway train, and I get the feeling that it's only profitable if the speed of that train accelerates and accelerates. Where is the capacity for the morality and ethics element to be profitable, to perhaps slow that train down? And being somebody who grew up with 4 sisters, a very powerful mother, and an incredible wife, I'm used to being told, no, don't do that. If the role of the divine feminine is morality and ethics, how can it be made to be profitable? Thank you.
Was that more of a comment or a question? You want? Yeah, but maybe we take her comment as well. Okay, you want?
I was listening only shortly, and there is a book from Iris Bonet, How It Works. And the thesis is, don't fix the woman, fix the system. Yep. Mm-hmm. And if you make this normal and not questionable, then it works. Fix the system. Go to the employer to make something different. And not the female competing in the male button with the males.
No, excellent point.
To your point, if I may, just a short comment here. I mean, two things. One, despite what you see here and despite the hype, the AI race is still very nascent. It's very, very nascent. AI at scale is still highly elusive. Deployment at scale. The narrative is peaking. 23 was the peak of hype, right? I'm hoping 24 becomes the valley of reality, where we start understanding what is really required for scale and how. To your point, trust is going to be most important for scale. You cannot scale technology that people do not trust, period. Just as simple as that. Therefore, as the hype settles down and we bring the focus back on scale and impact, we have to start thinking about trust. Ethics has a lot to do with trust, much more seriously than what we have been doing today. We have to put the words into action. I'm a strong believer that will happen if we have to deliver on the promise of AI. And I don't believe we have an option of not delivering on the promise of AI, because the promise of AI is increased productivity, and that the world needs. So we will have to figure this out.
My question was very
Can I, sorry, I'm just conscious that people may have to go. So we'll declare the formal part of this panel to a close. As I said at the beginning, I think this is, for all the things I did at Davos, I was genuinely most looking forward to the discussion. I learned a hell of a lot. So I do want to express my sincere gratitude to Chris, Devjani, Miraban, for sharing your wonderful perspectives, but also for the phenomenal work you're doing. That gives me cause for optimism. That gives me cause for hope. And I genuinely feel with the kind of things Minister Irani said, I think we can make a phenomenal difference. Of course, there are things to be done, like the questions you raised and the questions you're articulating. But I walk away feeling more optimistic than I came in. So I genuinely, that those are moments you cherish. So thank you again. And I'm sure if some of you can, Chris and Debjani, you can stay around, we can have the discussion. I also need to run to the Congress Center for a question. So thanks again. Yeah.
Thank you, Naresh.